Welcome to the session on subscriptions. I'm Rebecca Smart, CEO of Osprey Group. We have some subscriptions among our offerings, and I'm chairing this session this afternoon. It seems to me that the conversation in the book industry around subscriptions is very polarized. So it's either it'll never work, or on the opposite extreme, why aren't we doing it? And I'd like to tease out some of the issues in that today. We have with us three people who are at the heart of subscription initiatives in the industry, representing both publishers and platforms. So to my left, Nick Perrett from HarperCollins, Andrew Weinstein from Scribd, and Andrew Savvikas from Safari Books Online. I'm going to ask each of them to just do a 2-minute introduction to themselves and their involvement in subscriptions, and then we're going to go into a more informal question and answer and hopefully open to the floor. Over to you, Nick.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Nick Perrett. I'm responsible for strategy and digital at HarperCollins, which breaks down into digital product development and business development, and obviously strategy in any M&A we do. In terms of looking at subscription business models, obviously that's something that falls within business development as we look for new and interesting opportunities to drive royalties for authors. And I think in terms of experiences, obviously we're the first of the bigger publishers to make a move with a couple of startups, one of which is sat next to me, Scribd and Oyster in the US. So obviously we've got a lot of experiences from doing that.
So I'm Andrew Weinstein from Scribd, and I'm basically head of content acquisition and business development. My background is I've been in publishing for 15 years, have done 2 startups and spent 11 years in between at Ingram, both in a business development standpoint and a product management standpoint in both print on demand and ebooks. So working with publishers and over a very interesting decade between 2000 and 2010 on new technologies is something that I'm used to. Scribd, for those of you who are not familiar, we recently launched a unlimited subscription service for consumers, where a consumer can pay $8.99 per month and have access to as many ebooks that they'd like to read that we are authorized to make available in the subscription service. And for publishers, we pay publishers each time a subscriber reads a book.
Thank you.
I'm Andrew Savvikas with Safari Books Online. We are both a platform, but we're a platform that's owned by publishers. We're a joint venture between O'Reilly Media and Pearson. And while I'm, of course, thrilled to be part of a conversation about subscriptions, I think one difference in what we do is we are less about a consumer offering of books and much more about a corporate offering of learning material. So what our business really is packaging up a very large library of books as well as other learning materials and selling them to an enterprise customer, primarily like enterprise software, which most companies pay for, much like they pay for other things on a sort of monthly or annual basis. And so while we are thought of very much in the subscription vein, we really fundamentally are a way for publishers to get access to a corporate and enterprise sales channel that isn't otherwise very effectively served through traditional books.
Thank you. So one of the issues that comes up in discussion about subscriptions is demand. It's a chicken and egg. Is it that there's not enough content available for subscription and therefore nobody's subscribing? Is it that there actually isn't demand? What is the evidence telling us so far about the different areas where there is and is not demand? If we could start with you, Andrew.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the evidence certainly in the part of the market where we play is that the demand is only growing. We started in the technology side, but really we offer content and technology, business design, a range of material to support working professionals who want to keep up with how fast things are changing in technology and marketing and web design, in business and strategy and leadership. And the dollars that our customers give us come out of corporate training budget, HR resources, and this is $70 billion in the US and $130 billion worldwide and growing at 10 to 15% a year. So for us, we see enormous opportunity to capture some of that growing market and funnel it toward some of the great content that is already thanks to the hard work of people in this room going into the books. And this gets that in front of an appetite or an audience that has a very, very big appetite for material to help them do their job better.
And so moving on to the more consumer side of things, there's the big question, can the Netflix for books work? So what is it telling you? What's your evidence so far on the work with Scribd telling you?
So in October is when we announced our ebook subscription service, primarily because we had gathered a critical mass of content that would be interesting to consumers, and with the help of HarperCollins really put us over, that threshold. Our goal, Scribd is a 7-year-old company, and they got started in document hosting, and then they treaded into setting up a marketing platform for publishers, trying to help publishers market and monetize their books, and then extended that into a store. And what we found out is that we weren't really good at selling books one at a time, or the market didn't need another retailer like Scribd just to sell ebooks like the big platforms were. And when the company decided to refocus, because they truly are interested in keeping people reading, and whether it's user-generated content or professionally published books and everything in between, e-commerce, one book at a time selling was not going to be the answer for Scribd. And so we launched the subscription service thinking, okay, we're really good at getting people come to our site and reading free stuff. We're not as good at getting people to pay for stuff that they would like to read. Subscription seemed like a good middle ground where we do still have to get that consumer to hit the buy button once, but that buy button is now subscribe, and then they can just keep reading and never hit a buy button again. And I can tell you from publishers that have sold through our store and literally maybe couldn't have gone out to dinner on the amount of money we were paying them on a monthly basis, it is just a completely different story with subscription. And since we announced the subscription service and had put in a critical mass of content, we've been very impressed, and I think more importantly, our publishing partners have been very impressed with the size checks that we're writing to them on a monthly basis, the amount of reach that their books are getting, because the Scribd service is available on virtually all reading platforms, and it is available globally. And we've seen month over month double-digit percentage sequential growth since we started. And so we think there's demand there, and we're very encouraged by what's going on.
And are there particular subjects or particular markets that are responding more strongly than others?
The largest genres, or the most popular genres so far, and keep in mind, we're 6 months in, so it's tough to really, say these are going to be the long-term genres, but there aren't any surprises either. So romance, science fiction, young adult fiction, mostly young adult fiction, with some business, are the most popular genres of what's being read. But there's also, everything across the board in terms of what's being sampled. And it's really the combination of the marketing reach through the sampling, which we can make available to the subscribers and the non-subscribers, but also the monetization, which is really only through the subscribers, where we're seeing really romance, mystery, young adult fiction, and business.
Does that chime with you as well, Nick?
Yeah, I think, to the point of is there demand for subscription, I struggle to think of a vertical of the media industry where there isn't a subsegment of consumers who would like to transact with books with that media in that way. Possibly video games is not so much subscription based, although online games are subscription based in the main. So I think it's very difficult to find a segment of consumers who would not pay. And then I think it comes down to, okay, well, if there was always, if you believe that, then then what is the right package to offer them such that they will pay? And I think it's clear. Obviously it's early days. You only have one of the big publishers engaged with Scribd, so it's very difficult to make that judgment call on how big can the subscription segment of the market be until you've got a catalogue that I think would need greater scale to really know how big it can be. But certainly, the signs are very encouraging just like they are in B2B, just like for Collins Education that we have in B2E. So I don't think the right question is, is there demand? I think that question is clearly answered. I think it's more a question of how big an opportunity is this, and can it be set up in such a way that it's valuable to the ecosystem, authors and publishers.
And what's your view? How big an opportunity is it?
I think it's too early to tell. I think our desire is to be, when it comes to new digital things, is to be there first and to learn with these guys. And one of the core things that we're interested in is learning, actually. And I think being there first gives you an opportunity to both learn and also to co-architect something a lot more tightly than perhaps a later mover. But I certainly, I'm excited about subscriptions, as I said at a conference last week. I think it's a really interesting part of the market that we should be in.
Thank you. And you talked about whether it can be set up in such a way that the whole community can achieve the level of revenue that everybody needs. And lots of publishers are not going into subscription for precisely that reason, because there's a concern that it'll end up a smaller pot and that's got to be shared out. Andrew, I know you have some particularly strong views about this.
Yeah, I mean, we're very fortunate to have HarperCollins as a partner, and not just as a test. I mean, they really put in the majority of their backlist into our service from the beginning. And I think, most publishers, when they think about subscriptions, in their mind, it's all or nothing. They either have to put all their titles in or it's not. And I think something that Nick said is really important. I think subscriptions have a place in the market, a part in the market. I don't think anybody here believes that subscriptions will be the market. And I think, when we talk to publishers, if they are very pessimistic or hesitant to trying subscriptions or it's usually because they're thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to my retail sales? And Scribd can only go so far in terms of easing that. And the way that we've attempted to address that is by removing the financial risk. If that same user who, instead of buying it at a retail website, reads it on Scribd, we're paying the publisher the same amount of money. So if there's a $10 book and your terms are 50 off wholesale price, you're used to getting $5 from Amazon or Apple or Barnes & Noble, you're going to get $5 from Scribd when that subscriber reads the book. And so we've tried to take the financial risk. If that sale is 100% or that read is 100% cannibalistic, then you're indifferent as to whether or not that book was sold through a traditional retailer in a model that you're very familiar with, or whether you're experimenting with subscription models with Scribd. It's most publishers, I would say we have a fair amount of publishers that do give us all of their titles. And in general, the attitude is we're an additional sales channel. We're an additional way to reach a consumer that is not reading the book or purchasing the book through a retail store. And for them, it's all about, I want more people reading my books, and I'm willing to go to where those readers are. And I think there's a whole generation of people that are being trained to consume media, whether it's their Netflix subscription or their Spotify subscription, which a lot's been written about their business models with publishers. I just told you the Scribd business model and how you're going to get paid through it. What's important is that they went to where the consumers are, and we're going to where the consumers are. And we firmly believe that there are people that would feel more comfortable paying $8.99 per month and reading as many books as they'd like than paying for a book one at a time. And the behavior that we're starting to see, or that we're inferring based on the information we see, is a lot more people are starting 3 or 4 books at a time, because there's no paywall, there's no penalty to them for starting a book and then putting it down. Readers, when they're on Scribd, aren't trying to figure out what book they're going to purchase next, but what they're going to read next. And I think that's a fundamentally different behavior than what a consumer does when they go to a website like Amazon or Apple or Barnes & Noble today.
Are there the others? Do you have?
I'll just echo the point about the differences in behavior. I mean, we do have a different economic model than Scribd. We actually pursue, it's more of a revenue share approach because that's what we found made the most sense for the kind of product and market that we have. But I'll certainly echo that it's a fundamentally different user behavior, especially with our model. I mean, a typical use case for us is I'm sure all of you are familiar, especially the early part of the year. It's performance review time. You got a manager who needs to write a difficult performance review this afternoon and wants some help doing that. And so a typical use case for someone using Safari is that a manager will search for performance review phrases and find the chapter from a book that gives them a lot of great information about how to do that. And that's something that the alternative for them is not that they're going to go and browse and find, certainly not a paper book, and probably not even an ebook to satisfy that need. The alternative for them would be they're going to go to Google and try to filter through whatever search results come up there. And instead, their employer wants to give them access to stuff that's not having to sort through Google results, but stuff that comes from quality publishers who've already done the job of making sure this material makes sense and is good. And so it's really not something that, and we have 12 years of data now that pretty consistently demonstrates that, well, maybe not 100% of the time, but I can say with a high degree of confidence that this is not a cannibalistic addition to the market. It's really an additive thing that helps complement existing sales channels.
And Nick, do you feel like you have enough data yet to comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, so I think in terms of what would make a viable ecosystem from the content owner, I suppose, perspective, the way we think about that is really a function of four things: discovery, reach, the royalties that we're able to pay to authors, and data. So if you take, the first one is obviously, if you're looking at, I was actually looking at this data this morning, sadly. 7 years of progression from basically zero of our product being sold over the internet to over 60% now in a very short space of time. So the predominant model clearly is moving away from a trade-oriented B2B marketing structure to a more consumer-oriented structure. So obviously the more places that people can find and interact with our content, that's a very good thing. For reach, obviously, as someone who cares about the value of content, the best outcome for a publisher, and we have this conversation very openly, the best outcome for a publisher is to have multiple points where retail points where consumers can access that content, so you don't end up with a market that's concentrated where one person who's satisfying the consumer takes a dominant position in the market. So that's obviously something that we're encouraging new channels to market all the time for that reason. And then directly related to that, our core job is to maximize royalties that flow back to our authors. So being able to explore business models in a financially de-risked way, which as Andrew described it, is absolutely spot on and critical to, I think, the viability of the ecosystem for the author in the very long run. And data, I think that we're, as an industry, I think we're very data poor. Certainly coming from a different part of the media industry, where I knew how many people were interacting with my product on a daily basis. I knew who they were. I knew where they came in, where they left. All these kinds of things that enabled me to understand better how to get them engaged in the product and how to maximize the lifetime value that I got from those users. Obviously, now working with Scribd, we have a very rich data set from which to potentially improve not only our marketing decisions, but potentially also our publishing decisions based off that data. So it's very interesting.
But obviously there's a platform side to that as well. So if you look at the TV world, we've now got Netflix and Sky starting to drive creative decision making, whether it's creating a new series or sustaining one that no one else will. Just coming to you two platform representatives, do you see that as something that could happen in the book world?
From Scribd's point of view, I think that drawing conclusions based on 6 months of data we've been very hesitant to draw any real conclusions that would start driving publishing decisions at this point. I think we use the data that we're generating to inform our subscriber acquisition and retention efforts. And so, for us, we have a huge database of existing users that we've built up over 7 years that we're constantly, or not constantly, we are carefully soliciting to convert into subscribers. But then we invest quite a bit in paid advertising and doing a lot of testing with which titles to feature in terms of trying to solicit subscribers to join or to initiate a free trial, as well as how we merchandise and personalize every subscriber's experience. Once a subscriber comes into Scribd, they get a very heavily personalized experience based on data of what they've read, but also what other people like them have also read. And it's really that personalization with a light touch of editorial merchandising to kind of give a little bit of serendipitous, discovery that we think is part of the future. And at least that's how we're driving decisions for ourselves. I would hesitate to say to a publisher tomorrow, because of this, all of your books should be under 200 pages, or start changing the creative process. I think authors do a great job right now. I think a good book is a good book, and I think that data can help inform decisions when people reach a crossroads. But we've really focused on using the data ourselves and testing it out on ourselves before we really make any recommendations or share what we think would be a good idea with very important partners like HarperCollins.
What about within your niches, Andrew? Are there other areas where you've been able to say, yes, there is demand for this, and perhaps you publishing, or O'Reilly are publishing things that they wouldn't have published?
Oh, no question. And I think we are also very tuned into the kind of data that is available in a web-based environment. I think that's so fundamentally important, and that's one of the things that we're able to provide to the publishers we work with. Is I'm not particularly interested in getting into the content creation business. We have a lot of work to do with our own limited resources on sales, on marketing, on technology, on customer support, on operations. And we want to partner with the publishers who have the brand recognition and who have the capability to produce this content. And in fact, that's something that we do with some publishers on a quarterly basis. We will sit down with them and go through the data and say, here are the key topics that we're seeing a big spike in search traffic on in our service and a big spike in usage and interest on, but we only have these 3 or 4 titles. And there are publishers who have really, and in part because we have grown to such a sizable portion of their sales, they can really publish material that in large part informed by the demand they're likely to see with our audience. And so it's become a very virtuous cycle for us with the publishers, where we're very happy to share this data and in some cases help them interpret the data in a meaningful way to point them toward topics that they might not otherwise be seeing on their own or might not realize. In some cases, I think you mentioned O'Reilly, and that's a great example. That's a company that is always well ahead of the curve in terms of technology development. And sometimes they kind of forget that most of the market and most companies aren't really quite there yet. And so for them, sometimes it's a nice reminder that there's still a lot of companies building software in older languages and older technologies. So for them, it's not quite as shiny and new anymore, but it's still the bread and butter of the enterprise. And that's sort of a nice lesson. Another thing there, the data is showing us, for example, and this is something that's initially affecting the technology sector, but I strongly suspect it will affect many other nonfiction and professional kind of publishing in the near future, is an explosion in appetite for video training, in particular among younger audience. So what we're seeing is that there is a very strong demand, not necessarily instead of, but in addition to text content, for video content, video training, video courses. And that's something where, in part based on the data that we have from our multi-million user base, been able to show them where the opportunity is and help them apply their editorial and content curation and content development capabilities to a new sort of form factor. And that's been really helpful for them to diversify their revenue base and really help to sort of get ahead of where the demand is for that audience.
If I could just echo something Andrew said, I really want to emphasize that the data relationships that we've had so far, it's very much a synergy of the two companies, the publisher and Scribd, where we've started creating dashboards where we can see interactions and we can track things to the granular level, but they don't actually make any sense to us because we haven't read every book that's there. When we showed this data to the publisher and we say, what do you think? The first sets of reports that we thought would be interesting to us weren't interesting to us, and they start having the publishers start having aha moments because they see, oh, this book got a lot of exposure, but it didn't translate into a lot of reading activity. And here's something that got relatively little exposure and converted very well to reading activity. And things that show up on a list in rows 7, 100, and 360, to the publisher, it actually makes sense because they're all, very similar books, are written in a similar style, and only the editor could really figure that out.
So it's the insight.
It's absolutely the insight.
Just coming back to you, Nick. So data is obviously a big issue in the dynamic between a publisher working with a subscription platform. What are the other things that publishers should be thinking about when they're starting to work with these platforms?
Well, some of the things we've sort of covered briefly already, but obviously the catalog composition that you're going to put. I should say that with Scribd, we actually have both subscription content and a la carte content as well. So it's not a, to the exclusion of everything else. So I could easily see a scenario where you have a very healthy a la carte business. In fact, I was reading something about the airline industry's moving to subscription this morning with Air Berlin, and how actually having people subscribe to an airline created much more loyal customers than their standard loyalty program did. And actually the subscribers were very, very happy to continue to purchase on an a la carte basis. So I thought that was quite interesting for us, that to not look at it purely as a subscription only, and what am I going to allow people to subscribe to, and then everything else is off the table, because I don't think it's as simple as that. And I think the other reasons, other things for the publishers is just to get in there and learn, together as to what interesting things you can learn from having that level of access, which you might not get on other platforms.
Has it been tricky for you to get every part of the ecosystem to believe in what you're doing? If I phrase that sensitively enough.
You mean authors?
Authors.
Agents and authors?
All the way up the chain.
I think, so I think obviously the agents and authors are very concerned about economics,
Sure.
which I think we've very clearly addressed, that this is a good thing. These are new channels. These are people who might not otherwise have bought any of their books. Certainly if I was an author, which I'm nowhere near competent enough to be, but if I was, I would be particularly focused and interested in the backlist opportunity that these services offer, in terms of surfacing things that might never have made, because a lot of the architecture of, particularly architecture of digital stores, favors whatever's in the chart as the number one at that particular moment in time. And I think if you're not in that very first and foremost piece, then you're kind of lost. So I think that these services can be quite interesting for reviving demand for titles that might not otherwise sell. So to me it seems like a very overall positive move for everybody involved.
Do you two have anything to add on that in working with publishers?
I would just emphasize that, when we talk to publishers, we're very careful to emphasize, again, the financial risk or lack thereof, and that this is an experiment. we've picked $8.99 as the price. It's the first price we went out with, and so far it seems to be working. We're operating the model in a sustainable way, which means that we've got some readers that are reading a heck of a lot and a lot more than $8.99. So we're paying publishers $15, $20, $40 for a single subscriber's reading activity in a month. And we have some other subscribers that started a few books, but really didn't read any of them. And then we have, of course, the pure breakage model, where they've joined, they like the fact that they can read something if they like, but they didn't happen to read anything that particular month. I think the way that we look at it is we launched something 6 months ago, and we want to be a meaningful sales channel partner that expands the market for publishers, that keeps people reading and not watching and listening or playing or liking things. We want people to spend the same or more amount of time reading things, and we want more people to start reading if they're not reading today. And so it's a balance. And so far we've been, most publishers at the same time, they are, want to get paid faster and get paid more money by Scribd. They also worried about how sustainable we are. And I said, well, if you didn't make us pay us so fast or so much, then we'd be a lot more sustainable. But, yeah. But, I have to say, so far, we've been very pleased with the growth of the business. And I think publishers have been very happy with the growth of the payouts that we're making. And Scribd, as a single player in the ecosystem, I can't tell you definitively whether or not we cannibalized any sales, but most publishers that we talk to have not seen an impact in their sales through their other sales channel partners, or at least what they've shared with us. So we believe we started the subscription business because we felt there was opportunity to expand. I wish that I could say to Nick that our a la carte business took off, because we, at the same time that we have HarperCollins and most publishers backlist in the subscription, we have their new releases in our a la carte store, and we just write a much bigger check on the subscription of the backlist than we do at frontlist. So when people come to Scribd, they are not coming to buy things, they are coming to subscribe. And based on what publishers are telling us, people are going elsewhere to buy, and they keep buying because there really hasn't been an impact on the compensation they're receiving from their retail sales channels.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just 2 points. I'll echo the backlist piece, part of it, in that for us we see about 50% of the usage of titles in our service is for titles that are more than 2 years old, which is quite remarkable given the sort of more technical leaning content and audience. So it's definitely helps to sustain that sort of long tail backlist. In fact, 2 of our top 3 titles by usage and by the revenue we pay out to the publishers are, I think, more than 3 years old. Which is again pretty remarkable in a technology sector. And I think the sort of data and the traffic piece, and I think it's just an ability for a company like Scribd to apply the assets they have, and the same company like us to apply the assets we have. I'm sure that Scribd has an immense amount of inbound organic search traffic, most likely. Certainly measured, I'm sure, in the millions, if not tens of millions. And these are all people they have an opportunity to convert into subscribers or paying customers. And these are eyeballs that most books are going to have a really hard time getting in front of through another way. So it's a chance for publishers to help leverage the unique capabilities of an online system like Scribd, just as we heard this morning about YouTube. Again, this is a place where a lot of people already are, and can you use that as an opportunity? And same thing for us. We have an enterprise sales force that is out there talking to Fortune 500 companies every day, talking to their chief learning officers. And I guarantee it's going to be very difficult for a publisher to get in front of the chief learning officer at a Fortune 500 company to convince them to write a 6 or 7 figure check for books. But that's exactly what we're effectively doing every day. And so it's a chance for publishers to expand and diversify their sales channels and leverage the capabilities that have emerged as the web grows and expands.
I'm afraid that we've run out of time for questions, but please join me in thanking Nick, Andrew, and Andrew.